Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Junia Doan's The Spark. I'm Junia Doan, and thank you for joining us. Today, I'm with Dr. Madhura Mansabdar, Chief Clinical Integration Medical Officer and Medical Director of the MidMichigan Health Network, MidMichigan, Collaborative Care Organization, and Connect Care. Welcome, Dr. Mansabdar. I hear there's a new program you're front and center with called Bridge to Belonging. Would you tell us about it?
Yes, in fact, I'm very excited about this program. It is a program that we are just beginning to embark on at MidMichigan Health, along with some of the communities that we serve. The Bridge to Belonging is a program to help identify individuals that may be experiencing loneliness, and along with loneliness, other determinants, other factors that may impact their healthcare outcomes, and then to be able to connect them with appropriate resources to be able to manage that perception of loneliness, as well as potentially impact some of the related outcomes that occur because of loneliness.
Are there different types of loneliness?
Well, there are a couple concepts related to loneliness. It's a fairly straightforward word in terms of loneliness, but really is a very intensely personal experience that individuals experience in their lives. And then there is another concept that's related, which is social isolation. Both of these have been addressed and identified as significant factors that affect healthcare outcomes in individuals. And so social isolation is more like an objective parameter, which really talks to the quantity and quality of interactions and social contacts that an individual has, whereas loneliness, like we said, is a perception. It is an experience that an individual goes through, and it has to do with a difference between an individual's perception of the quality of their social interactions in how they currently exist, or how the individual perceives they are, relative to what they would want.
Oh, interesting. Can you change perception, or how do you change perception?
That's a good question. And perhaps more by understanding, to be able to identify loneliness, to be able to name that feeling that one experiences, understand potentially some of the causes for loneliness, the factors that contribute to it, because these can be related to, again, objectively, the social situations of an individual, but they can also be related to a particular individual's ability to maintain social contacts and maintain quality of social contacts. So it can have many different dimensions as well as reasons.
It just seems to me that there are perhaps layers of contact or depth of contact. So you might be with a person, but not necessarily feel unlonely, not lonely, maybe even more lonely.
Absolutely.
What does that do to?
Again, your ability to connect with another individual around you can determine that perception of loneliness. So you may be in a crowd and be very lonely, whereas you may be just by yourself painting or writing and be perfectly happy with that level of contact. So yes, it's a deeply personal experience.
So you think, or it's perception, which is thought, more than biologic?
Right. Actually, thought, and how thought and that perception can impact your sense of well-being, which then impacts health. It's quite interesting to learn that loneliness can impact healthcare or healthcare outcomes as much as an individual smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
That's
So
startling.
that is the impact on health of the perception of loneliness.
So one of the things I'm thinking is, at one level, when we all feel lonely at one time or another, certainly I have, is the objective. Am I too socially isolated?
Right, right, the objective.
Or the other, am I tired? Have I eaten too much chocolate?
Am I depressed?
Am I depressed? You know, am I
Right.
bored? You know, is it time to change things? So that's one way of sort of looking at things. But the other way may be to say, oh, well, I could say I feel lonely, or I have a sense of loneliness, or I could say this is rest period between my
Right.
busy sets of lives during a
Right.
day or a week. And you're saying that if you change what you say to yourself, will the feeling change also?
If you understand it better and understand the nature of the feeling, the potential causes, as well as once you identify if you truly feel lonely, to be able to actually reach out and seek out resources and other forms of social contact that satisfy you.
And what are some of these forms or available options?
There could be some interesting ways to actually increase social contact, and these can vary, of course, those that are created by a healthcare setting or an organization, and those that are created in your socio-cultural environment. So once you have a better understanding of what really helps in this situation is to be able to have a menu of options available to you. And because different types of experiences are going to satisfy different individuals. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all. And so one of the options of resources that we can create are basically a whole gamut. So some, for example, could be if it was something that was created by a healthcare system, assume, or community-based organizations that are working with the healthcare system. This could be something like senior services in various counties, and these organizations have very specific programs that encourage communal interactions and experiences, playing games together, having different types of celebrations together. It could even be something as simple as line dancing.
Do we have a hotline in Midland or in the area where if you feel lonely, you can pick up the phone and say, I'm just having a tough day today, want to talk for a few minutes? Is there something like that?
That's a great question, as well as a great opportunity, actually, because that's the sort of thing that one would envision having.
Yeah.
And part of Bridge to Belonging, that's exactly what the program is about. The program is about identifying loneliness, both by healthcare providers as well as individuals in the community, to understand how loneliness impacts their health and the
Right.
availability of resources. So part of this is going to be related to building a hub of resources, so that once we are able to identify, both by the individual themselves or by a healthcare provider, once loneliness is identified as a risk factor, then that individual can be connected through a hub with various social agencies that, again, offer a menu of options for the individual to be able to access. And it'll also help in creating a role for volunteers, as well as individuals, for example, in the senior services communities, who can help individuals navigate the different resources so that they can better understand what's available and what might suit them. So it's not a hotline, but it is a hub.
So you have to sort of apply? Is that how you get into the hub?
You have to be able to first be identified. Either identify
you self-identify?
yourself. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Do we have a sort of birthday club where people can join up and it's your birthday and we make a big fuss, and it's my birthday and everybody who wants to celebrate makes a big fuss. Is there something like that?
Not that I know of within the community yet. I have heard of different types of settings where, in fact, even healthcare systems have a growing list of individuals that they connect with that often will come and participate in various informational sessions, and they start to get to know each other and they celebrate each other. So it could be a birthday club eventually, but there are many organizations that I have recently read about that are creating those sorts of venues.
So it's too early, really, to say.
It's a little early.
We don't know yet what works or what we have, because we're just trying to shine a light on this now and
First,
figure out.
exactly. Just the realization that loneliness can have such a great impact.
Yes, that is surprising.
On healthcare outcomes is just, it is known to increase the risk for depression. It is known to increase the risk for heart disease. It is interestingly known to increase the risk for cognitive decline and eventual dementia in individuals that are elderly and experiencing loneliness. So these are facts that we're all just beginning to learn about. And there are, in some other countries, in fact in the UK, they have developed a very well established program because this was recognized, and they even have a minister for loneliness. So it's very interesting that in other countries, especially where public health and population health has been prioritized, loneliness has been identified, and very specific efforts are beginning to be made, but it's very early still.
Very early. Interesting.
Which is why it's so unique that we're beginning to shine the light on it in our community.
And which organizations are involved in developing programs?
Here in the local community, it
Yes.
is the health system, along with organizations like Senior Services, the Central Michigan Community Health Department, ARC of Midland, the Disability Network, the Midland County, the recreational group, the Midland Community Center, Greater Midland Community Centers. And so these are the groups that are all working together to be able to connect and provide the resources together.
Does personality or, yes.
I'm
please
sorry.
Go ahead.
And most importantly, 211, which is the agency that you can actually pick up the phone and call, like you were saying. They are the ones that are going to help us create the hub for referrals and connection to resources. So 211 is a major
the simple way
partner.
for a person who's listening right now or watching right now is say, soon.
Soon,
At
and pick
some
up the phone
point,
and call 211.
211, that's all you need to do, and say,
Yes, in
I'm
fact.
lonely, I want to do something about it.
They can already help and start to connect, but over time we will create a systematic process for screening and then creating this hub of resources that can be electronically connected.
Is there a difference in how extroverts and introverts experience loneliness?
That's a good question. Clearly, when you're an introvert, you actually enjoy spending time within yourself. And because this is as personal of an experience as it is, I mean, I'm sure artists and poets and others will speak to times when they're truly inspired just by being by themselves or being in nature. Whereas extroverts they are fed by their social interactions. And so that is of tremendous importance to them. If they didn't have either direct or remote social interactions, they would feel lonely. So of course, yes.
So is there, the extrovert, an easier pathway because all they have to do is be with people?
Well, it has to be the quality of social interaction, clearly, because you can be with your family or you can be in a large group of friends and still experience loneliness, because your perception of the quality of that interaction is not as satisfying as what you would want it to be. So it's that gap between what you perceive as is currently and what you would want it to be.
I'm putting myself in that person's place at the moment. I'm saying, how would I, if I were dissatisfied with the quality, how could I enhance it? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, there are certain behavioral patterns that impact an individual's social quality of social interactions and sense of loneliness. So part of this has to do with, once you identify that yes, indeed you feel lonely, to be able to, one part of the resources has to do with trying to better understand what those behavioral patterns are. And it's also a pattern of thinking that individuals that have potentially certain mental health disorders, as well as just purely loneliness, may have different patterns of internalizing or experiencing relationships, cognitive thinking around relationships. And this may be something that actually can be altered through therapy and counseling. So there are, and it may even just be as simple as self-reading and learning about those thought processes and how we potentially think differently about relationships. So a significant part of this is accessing by oneself resources that can be made available to change that thinking pattern.
I'm thinking over what you said.
It's a little bit like maybe, an example is marital counseling, for example.
Okay.
One may be married, and for the rest of the world you're happily married, but within the marriage you experience loneliness because the relationship isn't quite as satisfying to you as you would want it to be. So then when we start to access resources related to that, we learn ways in which we may be thinking differently about our spouse, or maybe there are actions that our spouse takes for you that we react to differently. And as you learn about those patterns of reaction, you learn how to change them for the better. So that can happen with other relationships as well. And this has to do partly with understanding that cognitive thinking pattern as well as our reaction patterns in how that eventually evolves into different types of relationships, a quality of relationships.
I once interviewed a man, and he talked about ways you can experience love and how different they are. And I think that's a really good place to begin. You know, what gives you a sense of being unlonely, of being contacted, of being in relationship, or however it is described? Is it listening? Is it touch? Is it doing things? Is it gifts? Is it writing? Is it suggesting new things? What is the what? And that might be one of the bridges.
It very well could be. Absolutely. In fact, some of the questions that we ask to be able to bring out this perception are very subjective questions, but that have an element of objectivity to them. Questions like, do you feel people around you care for you? Or do you feel a sense of belonging in your workplace or where you live or in your community? And that brings out a very subjective feeling, but in an objective way.
Interesting. So you need someone really trained to interpret that almost.
A little bit, and you need to use questionnaires to try and identify loneliness, questionnaires that have been well validated, so that we know that we're measuring the right thing, because it is such a personal and subjective experience.
So interesting. So as a result of this interview I mentioned, I decided to test myself, not knowing the questions and you know, in this professional way. And what I found out is that I have an open heart when people do things for me, that somehow, unasked, you know, that I notice that. And the second thing is if they really hear me, they hear what I say. It's not that go get the book, but hear like the emotional level or the question or the soul or whatever. I find those anchor me. Gifts, not so much, you know, but earlier in my life, gifts were number one. And what it taught me, just from a personal point of view, is what you can consider contact or what you consider bonding may change either from
over
experience or what you tell yourself. So this is really very strong information. What's the strong information, I'm saying this so that you can correct me, is that if you find yourself in a bad frame of mind, a lonely frame of mind, the first thing you have to say is, A, okay, I feel lonely. Always get reality. Two, you have to say, what am I telling myself that's making me feel this way? And for three, for me, what can I do about it?
Right, absolutely.
Not somebody else, but what can I do? I can
about
call
it.
211 in the future. I can be with people. I can read a book. I can, rebalance my life or do whatever. I
Or
can
you
take
can
a class.
identify the reasons, maybe,
Or the reason.
why you feel the way you do, or why you don't have contact as much, satisfying contact with individuals. Maybe it is a matter of transportation. Two people that you would like to meet, but you just can't get to them anymore. Or it could be a matter of not being able to manage technology. Because increasingly, as we all know, we talk to each other through our mobile
the
devices.
non-contact contact.
Yes, and if you don't have access to it or you don't know how to use it, suddenly you realize that you're disconnected from a different generation. Maybe it's your grandchildren.
But I'm again, from a personal experience, I don't find my emotions are necessarily consistent. They change. And
Yes.
I'm asking you, or do you have an opinion? Do they change so quickly because my thought pattern changed?
Personally, I think that I've experienced that as well in terms of how your thought patterns can change. Once you understand there may be a certain negative cycle of reactivity that we get into at times and are not able to clearly identify when someone is trying to reach out to you.
Oh, interesting.
To identify the positivity behind an individual's actions or words, or even just in how they try to spend time with you. And if
what
you
would
don't
be some of
identify
those
that,
reach out things you might not notice?
it could be someone just coming and sitting down with you when you're reading a book. It could be as simple as that. It could be in school. You were sitting in the cafeteria and one of your other student friends or just acquaintances always makes a point to come and sit next to you. They may not say anything to you, but they may just come and sit. And if we don't perceive what is behind that action, we might completely miss the fact that someone's trying to reach out. So simple things like that. It may just be a touch. It may be just a touch on your hand. It may be how someone looks at you when they're listening to you. It could be so many different things with different people.
And what advice
And
would
different times, like you said.
what advice would you give when you notice someone trying to be friendly?
It would be important to first respond positively. And then start to explore what the other individual is looking for and see if that aligns with what you're interested in as well. But
Interesting.
first, if you receive a smile, give a smile back. There is nothing better than positivity in this world. There's too much negativity around us anyway. It would, if we can pass on and spread that positivity and warmth, I think that's just tremendous.
What values did your parents emphasize?
Friendliness, warmth, caring for each other, caring for living and non-living creatures, living and non-living objects. Because non-living may be an object, but if you identify the soul behind each individual or animal, even plants, to be able to connect and experience those, the commonality or the unity in our world, and be able to see that in other individuals as well, that they are looking for humans, animals, plants, are looking for the same degree of affection that you are. So to be able to connect with that, and that's what
How do you
I
make a
remember
soul
being taught.
connection with a person?
You look into their eyes, most importantly. And I think if they're trying to reach out and you are, either they're trying to talk to you or they're trying to connect, in whichever way, to be able to be open and receive that. I think that would be to be able to receive is very important.
How does one receive, to be open to receive?
That would be a question I think I would like to ask you as well, in terms of how do you feel? You've described that openness of heart and being able to listen, being able to connect when someone is trying to reach out in whatever way that they are, to first register the fact that they're trying to reach out. That, I think, is the more to be aware of that fact. Sometimes we're not even aware. And then when you, with respect and warmth, try to connect at the plane that they're trying to connect with you. It could simply be looking at them and hearing. It could be perceiving. It's different forms of perception. We have different senses that we can perceive with. So.
Thank you. So, we have learned a great deal. Life is under your control somewhat. And we spent a time today on loneliness, but loneliness, as it turns out, to my great surprise, I thought it was more biologic, is thought denominated, is thought driven. And therefore, if you change your thoughts, you can often change your conclusion or you change your feeling. Also, there is developing health options in the area, soon to be a 211 who will direct you, but also other ways through the hospital and senior services and a long list of cooperating institutions. I think that there's something that I'd like to spend a little time on, and that is soul connection. I think that people are hungry. This is my own personal view. When I look at a person, when I'm paying attention, I look at their souls. I experience their souls because I honor them that way. It may not necessarily be in what I say, but it is intentional, and it is, it's like I'm on the wavelength, however briefly or long. If we can give that to something, we have recognized the innateness of what they are, and that is a gift. So give a gift today, and remember, be kind. Do someone the small gesture of a smile or more. It's someone you know and someone you don't know. And I'll see you again next week, and thank you for tuning in. And thank you.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadonsthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadonsthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.